You spend weeks planning, planting, and watering your garden just to walk out one morning and see that the deer have turned your garden into their own personal salad bar. If that sounds familiar, then this episode is for you. Welcome to the Garden Gamble, where we're planting hope, taking chances, and growing memories for every season. I'm Ricki Clausen, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse in northern Minnesota. This podcast is for anyone who's ever stood in the garden, greenhouse, or backyard wondering if they're doing it right. Here we talk real-life gardening, the wins, the mistakes, and everything we learn along the way. Whether you're new to plants or have dirt permanently under your nails, you're in the right place. Let's take the gamble and grow together. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Garden Gamble, and today we're talking about one of those gambles that most gardeners take, and that is planting even though the deer and the wildlife might get into it. And I'm hoping that today's episode can kind of help point you in the right direction on some plants that are a little bit more deer resistant than some others. And now that we are kind of in the heart of gardening season, people are finally getting into their gardens and getting things planted. One of the comments that we've heard from some return customers that we've seen is they're coming back and getting plants because the deer have already gotten into their gardens and turned it into their own personal salad bar. And it is so frustrating when you've put in all of that work just for them to ruin it overnight. And I've been there. It is not fun, but there are a few things that we can do to kind of help combat this problem. So that's what we're talking about today is deer resistant plants. And I've got a few other tips on keeping the deer out and away from your plants. So we really hope that this episode helps with that. And I'm breaking it down into two different sections today, annuals and perennial options that are a little bit more deer resistant. So we're gonna dive right into our annuals list here first. And first on our list is euphorbia. And I'm talking about like the diamond frost. This is a very light and airy flower. It's got dainty little white flowers and is an excellent filler in baskets and containers. I love using this one. It's pretty heat and drought tolerant, and it has a toxic, sticky white sap that the deer like to avoid. Number 2 on our annuals list is lantana. I love lantana because this is also a very heat tolerant option. And lantana, if you're not familiar, it has beautiful clusters of flowers on very rich green foliage. It often comes in yellows and oranges and pinks. And there is a really pretty one that I personally love. It's the bandana cherry sunrise. That is kind of a combination of all of those colors, and it's just so pretty. And the leaves on lantana have a rough texture with a pungent, almost citrus-like scent and a bitter taste that the deer dislike. So I often point customers in that direction if they have deer problems. Number 3 is Tarina, and this is a good trailing shade option in the annuals, and it has a bitter taste that the deer don't like. And I really like using this one in containers and hanging baskets. It's pretty close to a true blue. It comes in a few different colors, but I like using this in shade options for like red, white, and blue planters. One of our local school colors is like blue and yellow, so I like using this in those combinations for that. I really enjoy Tarina. Number 4 is verbena, which is a trailing or crawling annual with like clusters of really gorgeous flowers. They come in a ton of different colors, from like a lime green to bright pinks, purples, red, all sorts of different colors of verbena. It's a very heat tolerant option, and it's great in landscapes, containers, and hanging baskets. I use it kind of all across the board. I really enjoy verbena, and it repels the deer with its citrus-like smell and taste. Number 5 is the cleome, sometimes called the spider flower, and this is a great upright thriller flower that gets about 3 to 5 feet tall. So it can be really huge. There's a ton of different varieties of cleums, but they're most often like pink or like lavender in color. And it kind of has almost like spider-like look to it, which is where it gets its nickname. And it has a fragrance that the deer don't like. This one is also very rabbit resistant. Number 6 is heliotrope, and this one has purple clusters of flowers, and it has a very heavenly scent. The deer don't like it, but people sure do. One of the gals that works here at the greenhouse, this is her favorite flower, and it was recommended to us by her, and it is one of our more popular flowers here, and I like directing people towards this one for a deer resistant option. Number 7 is one of my personal favorites, and that is Dusty Miller. And if you're not familiar with Dusty Miller, it is a silvery, fuzzy type foliage, and the deer don't like it because of its texture. I love Dusty Miller in containers, and I actually use it as a foliage in the cut flower farm too. And number 8 is probably the one you all were maybe waiting for, and that is the marigold. This is going to be our most common, and it is used for its scent. However, I have heard from a few people that the deer have still eaten their marigolds. But marigolds, we sell them like flat after flat. They're very common to put around like your vegetable gardens, and they are just a really stunning flower all by themselves as well. Now we're going to move on to some perennial options. Now, when I am helping design landscapes for some of our residential projects, or if I'm walking around with a customer here at the greenhouse, I really try to dig deep into where they're located to see how heavy of a population of deer they have around their area. Like last year, we did a project at one of our local churches, and when we pulled up to kind of go through the project and take a look at the church, the deer were right there, right when we pulled into the yard. So immediately I knew I needed to come up with some more deer resistant options for this church to help them be successful with their landscape project. So a few perennials that I like to use in heavily populated deer areas, I guess you could say. Number 1 is barberry, and it's deer resistant for very obvious reasons. They have little barbs on this shrub. It comes in a few different colors. There's like crimson, there's like a dark burgundy, like Cabernet. And one of my favorites is the limoncello, which is like a bright chartreuse green in color, and it just turns this really gorgeous color in the fall. So that is one that I really enjoy using in landscapes as a deer resistant option. However, with the barbs, yes, the deer don't like it, but some people don't really care for it either because it is pokey. So they don't really like handling it. But once it's in and established, it's pretty easy to maintain, and I personally really like it. Number 2 is the poppy, and the poppy, of course, is a really beautiful flower, perennial flower, and the deer don't like it because it looks very pokey and has a different texture. The foliage on it has almost like a thistle type look to it, and the deer tend to stay away from it. Number 3 is the Brunera heartleaf. I talked about this in a previous episode for spring blooming perennials. This one has like a silvery look and texture that the deer don't like. And this is one that I suggest as kind of like a hosta replacement because the deer love the hostas. So if you struggle with that, the Brunera heartleaf is usually what I suggest in its replacement. Number 4 is the ornamental onion or allium, and the deer stay away from it for its oniony fragrance, which for the most part you don't really notice, like unless you cut it as like, because it can be a cut flower as well, but unless you cut it, you're not really going to notice much of that scent for us, but the deer tend to stay away. Number 5 is Artemisia, the silver mound, and this one is like a short perennial used for its foliage, and it has a texture that the deer don't like. This is going to be really similar to like the Dusty Miller that I talked about in the annuals. Kind of has like that fuzzy silvery feel that the deer don't like. Number 6 is the peony, and peonies or peonies, however you want to say it. The plants have thick, leathery foliage and contain some natural compounds that taste bitter and are mildly toxic to deer. They will be just fine, but they take one bite and then they're going to stay away from it. So it's a very stunning perennial that has gorgeous, highly sought after blooms. And yeah, just a bonus that it is deer resistant. Number 7, the last perennial I'm going to talk about today is Salvia, and it is deer resistant for its scent and texture, and it's going to keep those deer at bay. So that kind of gets us to the end of our annual and perennial list. But another thing that I suggest to customers is a spray option, which is Liquid Fence, which is a deer and rabbit repellent. It's harmless to the plants and animals. It's one of those that it's just ready to use. And to apply this, you spray on the plants and around that area once a week for 3 weeks, and then once a month thereafter. And for the most part, it is pretty rain resistant, but it never hurts to maybe add a little bit more. And it repels them by its terrible odor. It is very smelly, but you're going to want to apply it on a very hot, dry day so it can dry. And once that dries, you're not going to notice the smell anymore. So it really stinks when you put it on, but once it's dry, we won't notice it, but the deer and the rabbits will tend to stay away. So just a little recap for today and some easy ways to remember it when you're out shopping at greenhouses and garden centers this season. If the deer pressure is heavy, choose plants with fuzzy leaves, strong fragrances, bitter sap, or coarse textures. And those are going to tend to be left alone more often than some of those tender, almost succulent type plants. And combining several deer resistant options together is usually going to provide better protection rather than relying on one deer resistant plant in a grouping. And there is no such thing as a completely deer-proof plant, but there are plants that deer are much less likely to eat. And although we can't control the weather or the wildlife, you can make smarter plant choices that take a little bit of the gamble out of gardening. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and we will see you next week. Thanks for joining me on The Garden Gamble. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow plant lover. Gardening isn't a gamble when you have the right guidance, and you don't have to figure it out alone. Until next time, take care.